Welcome to the Renaissance Spirit.
Salve, my dear friend. I am Emperor Septimius Severus. I speak now from the recesses of history, stripped of imperial laurels and grandiosity, to meet you not as the spectre of the Severan dynasty, but as Lucius Septimius Severus, a man who walked a perilous and storied path from the sunlit coasts of Africa to the thunderous heart of Rome. Know that in recounting my tale, I seek neither absolution nor blind admiration. I aim instead to reveal myself to illuminate the veins of ambition, love, toil, and peril that forged my reign. I will carry you through my rise, my struggles against foes, visible and hidden, my reigns, reforming vigor and ruthless pragmatism, and into the shadowy end that fate had laid bare before me. But first, let us tread back to where it all began. I was born in 145 CE in Leptis Magna, a vibrant city on the coast of the province of Africa Proconsularis. You may see Africa as a province distant and secondary, but understand that it pulsed with intellect and prosperity. My family, of Punic and Roman roots, were wealthy equestrians, solid, respectable, yet ambitious. My father, Publius Septimius Severus, while dignified, held no senatorial titles, but my grandfather had achieved senatorial rank, hinting at aspirations I was expected to exceed. In my youth, I was imbued with this fire to achieve more, to ascend past social expectation. I possessed a hunger for learning, schooled well in Latin and Greek rhetoric. Like Rome herself, I was a product of multifaceted influences: Punic pragmatism, Roman ambition, and the philosophical leanings of the Greek mind. My cousin, Gaius Septimius Severus, encouraged my aspirations, speaking endlessly of Roman politics and whispering tales of ambition. Yet the path was steep. My heart wavered between tradition and innovation, my eyes set upon glory, but aware of its price. I loved my siblings, my younger brother, Geta, and sister, Septimia. Yet we were often distant, caught in the web of our own ambitions. Family bonds became more fluid as Rome tightened its grip upon me. While I would later savor political and familial alliances, my rise was marked by cold calculations and heated passions, marriages, fatherhood, betrayals, and bonds that stretched thin across time and circumstance. Even then, standing upon the craggy cliffs of Leptis Magna, I looked out at the sea and wondered what storms awaited me in the capital. I knew that a life destined for greatness and ruin awaited beyond the waves. My ambitions reached far, yet with every ascent, gravity called. The struggle against it would define every breath of my future. Yet the tides of Rome have their currents, and they carried me. In the Senate, my voice, measured, persuasive, began to rise, but the path to the throne would come neither easily nor honorably. It is there we must journey next, into the halls of power and deceit, where even a touch of hesitation could lead to ruin. For if my youth was a forge of ambition, my rise was the crucible through which I would be tested. Journey with me into part 2, where whispers of greatness turned to shouts of triumph, and I climbed Rome's highest seat, learning just how much blood it took to gain and hold power. I stood upon the stone steps of the Roman Senate, the air heavy with ambition and intrigue, my voice poised for influence, yet treading carefully through labyrinthine politics. You who seek to understand the fire that burned within me must know that power in Rome was no gift, but a prize wrested from clashing wills and dripping blood. My early political career was marked by precocious success. I became a senator under the Emperor Marcus Aurelius, proving myself loyal, shrewd, and tenacious. To succeed in Rome, you needed more than intellect and vigor. You needed resilience, calculation, and, above all, luck. My years of service were but a prelude to the struggles ahead. The death of Marcus Aurelius brought turbulence. His son, Commodus, was a festering wound upon the empire, a reckless and erratic ruler who cared little for Rome's virtue or tradition. Beneath his erratic reign, factions grew and whispers of dissent spread like wildfire. The Praetorian Guard, ever the fickle masters of fortune, betrayed and murdered him. His death, however, was but the opening salvo in a chaotic power struggle that would shape my destiny. Enter the Year of the Five Emperors. I watched from afar, commanding legions in Pannonia, as emperors rose and fell with startling rapidity. Pertinax, Julianus, and then the contenders Pescennius Niger in the east and Clodius Albinus in the west. It was chaos, and in chaos opportunity often hides. My legions, loyal, disciplined, and hungry, proclaimed me Augustus in 193 CE. Yet ambition alone would not suffice. A blood had to be shed. First, I moved against Didius Julianus, the man who had shamelessly bought the imperial title from the Praetorian Guard like a merchant at market. He was quickly dispatched, and my legions entered Rome. I was determined to cleanse the empire of corruption, but I would not be a puppet to the Praetorians. Unlike Julianus, I would not bow to their demands. Instead, I sought to reshape them into a loyal force through reorganization and the threat of ruthless discipline. Still, my fight was far from over. Pescennius Niger had proclaimed himself emperor in the east, and Clodius Albinus, my uneasy ally in Britain, lurked with ambition of his own. I marched eastward, defeating Niger's forces in a brutal campaign marked by fire and siege. Blood stained the sands of the east, and the scent of conquest emboldened me. I moved with relentless force, for I knew the empire needed unity and my reign required legitimacy won on the battlefield. Next came Albinus, who dared to turn on me. He marched from Britain, clashing with me in Gaul at the Battle of Lugdunum in 197 CE. The fighting was fierce, a clash of giants that saw the rivers run red. In the end, I emerged victorious. Clodius Albinus lay dead, and the empire was mine. But unity and victory demanded a toll. The lives lost and blood spilled were the price of order. Yet, as I ascended, my dreams for a stronger Rome grew sharper. I envisioned reforms and stability, justice tempered with iron. But how could I ensure my legacy would be one of strength and not tyranny? The contrast with past emperors would become clear. Rome needed my stern hand, but the judgment of history would weigh my means. Next, we shall reflect on my reign itself. A story of power's contradictions and a legacy that would echo far beyond my time. For I ruled as both reformer and conqueror, and in this duality lay the seeds of change and ruin. The throne of Rome is a heavy burden, not merely a seat of authority, but a crucible where ambition, duty, and sacrifice clash. When I ascended, the empire was fractured, teetering under the weight of its past indulgences and the growing chaos at its borders. My predecessor, Didius Julianus, exemplified the corruption and weakness that had seeped into Rome. An emperor who purchased his rule like an extravagant bauble from the marketplace, sullying the dignity of the purple. In contrast, I seized the throne with strength and purpose, determined to restore Rome's faded glory. My reign would not be one of decadence, but of hard-won discipline, reform, and order. My first act was to reforge the Praetorian Guard. These men who once sold imperial power to the highest bidder now answered to me and me alone. I executed those whose loyalty wavered and replenished their ranks with my fiercest legions. Where Julianus had been their pawn, I was their master. Some called me ruthless. I called it necessity. Without a loyal and disciplined guard, no emperor could hope to reign securely. Where Julianus faltered, I pressed forward, turning my gaze outward. I understood that to protect Rome, I must strengthen it from within and without. The frontiers of the empire demanded a firm hand. Parthian incursions threatened our eastern provinces, and I would not tolerate such threats. I marched eastward, crushing the Parthians and establishing Roman supremacy once more. The triumphal arches and monuments erected in Rome still stand as testimony to these victories, physical proof that Rome's heart could still beat with strength. My reforms in the military, from increasing pay and granting land to loyal veterans, strengthened the legion's bond to me. Stability, I believed, lay in the loyalty of Rome's sword arm. Yet my reign was not without contrasts, not without shadows that darkened its legacy. Beneath the veneer of power, some whispered of tyranny and fear. My laws against treason were harsh. Conspirators were rooted out and shown no mercy. I enacted these measures to ensure stability, but at what cost? Unlike the chaotic rule of Julianus, my empire was orderly, but order is often won by the silencing of dissent. I offered reform streamlining justice, supporting provincial infrastructure, and nurturing commerce, but my coin bore two faces. On one side, strength and growth; on the other, fear and control. Where my predecessor had left Rome vulnerable and bloated, I left it fortified, but fortification came at a cost. My ambition to consolidate power passed on to my sons Caracalla and Geta, a legacy soaked in the blood of civil war. They would inherit an empire strong but divided, bound by my iron hand but prone to fracture when I loosened my grip. As I grew older, I pondered the worth of such contradictions. I, who had strengthened the state, also sowed seeds of familial discord and unrest. For every reform enacted, there were whispers of oppression. For every victory secured, the question of sustainability lingered. How would posterity judge my rule? Would I be remembered as the restorer of Rome's might, or as a ruler whose ambition fed on the edge of a sword? I invite you now to accompany me to the brink of my final days, to the brittle bones of old age and the shadows of death that crept ever closer. For my reign was but a span of years. The legacy I built, however, would bear fruit long after I departed this world. And so the path leads us next to my last breath, and the truth whispered into history's ear. Old age crept upon me with the weight of 1,000 campaigns. My limbs, once strong and swift in battle, now ached with the chill of time. It was 201 CE, and I found myself at Eboracum, what you call York-on, the misty edge of Britain. I had come here, an old lion, seeking to stamp out the embers of rebellion on the frontier, but my body betrayed me. I, who had crossed deserts and crushed kings, now struggled to rise from my cot. My empire, Rome herself, loomed heavy upon my mind, but the shadow of death had begun to eclipse even the concerns of empire. I could feel the cold fingers of fate tightening their grip, pulling me toward the abyss. that every man, emperor or beggar, must face. As my end drew near, my sons Caracalla and Gaeta stood by my side, though not as loving heirs but as rivals. They were the fruit of my legacy seeds sown in ambition and watered with ambition's venom. I looked upon them with a mix of pride and sorrow, for I knew that my greatest achievement uniting a fractured Rome would be tested by their ambitions. I recalled my wife, Julia Domna, a woman of keen intellect and unwavering resolve, who had stood by me through every trial. I saw in her eyes a silent plea for unity, a hope I knew would be in vain. With failing breath, I imparted my final counsel to my sons: be harmonious, enrich the soldiers, and scorn all others. These words, born of experience, were my last attempt to preserve the unity of Rome. But as I looked into the cold, calculating eyes of Caracalla and the wary, defensive eyes of Gaeta, I knew that blood would soon flow between them. My legacy was secured for the moment, but threatened for the future. As the hour approached, memories flooded me. I saw again the sands of Leptis Magna, felt the warmth of the African sun upon my face. I heard the clash of swords at Lugdunum, the roar of the crowd as I entered Rome in triumph. I had ruled with strength and wisdom, with ruthlessness and reform. I had crushed enemies, reshaped the empire, and laid the foundations for future stability. Yet at what cost? Did my ambition make me a savior or a tyrant? Would the historians of Rome exalt me or curse me? In the end, my breath grew shallow. The weight of my conquests, my reforms, and my ambitions pressed down upon my chest. I could feel death's approach, and with it, the questions of legacy. As I closed my eyes for the last time, I did so with no certainty, only the hope that Rome would endure beyond the chaos I foresaw. My vision dimmed and the whispers of Rome's future faded. So ended my life, Septimius Severus, emperor and conqueror. The empire would march on, but I would no longer guide it. What would follow my death was beyond my reach, but my story was not yet over. There remained the tale of what I left behind, and a legacy that would shape the Rome to come, for better or worse. Next, we must turn to that legacy, the balance of strength and ambition, stability and strife. Did I truly serve Rome, or did Rome serve me? The truth lies somewhere between. The empire I left behind was forged through the iron of conquest and the reformist vigor of necessity. My reign reshaped Rome's military, legal, and administrative structures, bringing a fleeting stability to an empire perpetually at risk of collapse. But legacies are fickle things. They grow and evolve beyond our intentions, leaving scars and triumphs for historians to argue over long after we have crumbled into dust. I, Septimius Severus, laid the foundations of a new Rome, but was my legacy one of salvation or ruin? This posterity must decide. I strengthened the legions, increasing their pay and granting them land, a move both wise and dangerous. The army was the backbone of my power, the force that had carried me to the purple, and I knew its loyalty had to be secured. Yet this very reliance on military might sow seeds of dependence. Rome would continue to rely on the sword to settle disputes, and my successors, including my own sons, would learn that loyalty bought with coin and privilege was fragile indeed. In the realm of law, I sought to bring order to chaos. I reformed the judiciary, emphasizing fairness and reducing corruption. provincial governors were subjected to greater oversight, curbing excesses and abuses. I endeavored to integrate distant regions into the Roman fold, nurturing infrastructure and commerce. My beloved Africa was a special beneficiary of these efforts. Roads, harbors, and trade routes flourished. Leptis Magna, my birthplace, rose to new prominence, a jewel of the empire, a testament to what could be achieved with strong central rule. But such prosperity was always conditional. Stability, I knew, was as fragile as the man who wielded the power to enforce it. To some, I was a tyrant, a man who secured power by crushing dissent and stifling opposition. My purges, ruthless as they were, aimed to root out treason and chaos. But in the harshness of my rule, was I truly different from Rome's best rulers, who knew that mercy unchecked invites ruin? My harsh measures were pragmatic, even if they were brutal. It was the price Rome demanded for survival. Still, I am not blind to the charges laid against me. Did I encourage a dynasty bound to self-destruction? The answer is perhaps yes. My sons Caracalla and Getastand as my most glaring legacy. They inherited an empire more secure than it had been in decades, yet within that security lay seeds of hatred. Caracalla's murder of Geta, his own brother, would split the Severan dynasty and drench the empire in blood. Did I fail them as a father, or were they doomed by their inheritance, the weight of a crown forged from ambition and violence? This blood feud between my sons would mark a dark chapter in the Severan lineage. My reforms could not save them from themselves. Yet I do not regret my path, for Rome needed my hand. The chaos of past emperors, the indolence of Commodus, and the corruption of Julianus, all were swept aside. I rebuilt the empire's strength and stability, but perhaps at a price too high to bear in the long term. My rule was as a storm cleansing and destructive. The legacy I leave, therefore, is a paradox. A Rome stronger, yet more reliant on power's precarious edge. What, then, is the true value of power and stability if they come at the cost of peace and unity? To answer this question, one must look beyond my life. Journey with me now as we confront the most difficult reflection. Was it all worth it? Did my ambitions serve a greater purpose? Or did they merely continue Rome's cycle of conflict and unrest? My own words upon the pages of history seek to find the meaning of my reign. Was it worth it? I ask myself this now as a shade among the shadows of history. My deeds, my conquests, my ambitions, did they truly serve Rome? Or did they serve only me? My reign saw an empire reforged, but every blow of the hammer upon Rome's iron backbone carried a cost. I ruled with strength and ruthlessness because I believed it necessary to preserve the empire. Yet, as I reflect from beyond the veil, I wonder if I traded one form of chaos for another. To those who see me only as a conqueror, know this: I believed in the promise of a strong, unified Rome. The empire had become bloated and unstable, weighed down by complacency and weakness. I wanted to bring about a balance, to restore the values that had once made Rome great. My reforms touched many aspects of life law, administration, the military, but each improvement came with sacrifice. I could not have brought stability without fear, nor could I have crushed dissent without blood. Perhaps this is the tragic paradox of power. To preserve a vision of unity, one must rule with a heavy hand. Was this tyranny, or was it the only way forward? Yet, I cannot ignore my failures. The seeds of violence between my sons Caracalla and Geta were sown by me. I wanted them to rule together, to embody the strength and unity I envisioned for Rome. Instead, they embodied Rome's fractious heart, and their rivalry led to fratricide and renewed chaos. It is a painful legacy and one I must accept responsibility for. My ambition, my reforms, even my love as a father, all contributed to this tragic end. The empire continued, but the wounds remained. And what of the values I claimed to champion? I spoke of equality, but true equality eluded the people of Rome. My reign was marked by stability, but stability bought with fear and suppression. Freedom was conditional, and liberty was limited by the whims of power. Did I fail these ideals, or did I do all that could be done in an era defined by survival? These questions linger with me. In hindsight, I know that power and stability must be balanced by compassion and a respect for all citizens, not merely for those who wield the sword or whisper in the halls of power. Equality, freedom, and democracy cannot survive in a culture that thrives only on conquest and control. If my reign taught me anything, it is that Rome's strength depends on the hearts of its people as much as it does on the might of its legions. To those who walk Rome's ruins today, I offer this final reflection. Learn from my reign. See my victories and my failures as mirrors of humanity's struggle. Travel to Leptis Magna and stand where I once stood. Walk the streets of Rome. Touch the stones where history was made. And let it remind you of the cost of ambition. Collect the coins bearing my likeness, but remember that each face on Roman currency tells a tale of strength and consequence, of glory and pain. Thank you for listening to my story. Our channel, The Renaissance Spirit, dedicates itself to pursuing a just, equitable, and humanitarian world. We delve into history, politics, religion, society, culture, social and environmental justice, and more, including comparisons between ancient Rome and today's world. Together, we seek truth and understanding, embrace knowledge, compassion, and a sense of shared humanity. For these are the paths to being better stewards of our earth and each other. Please subscribe, turn on notifications, and share your thoughts. And now, are you ready to see if you embody the Renaissance spirit? Take the quiz and may history's lessons guide you well. Vive Renaissance Spiritus.